a cup of coffee with Kristin. So excited to be jumping on here with you on this Wednesday for our midweek and our midday caffeine coffee break with Kristin. And we are going to talk Jeep education and knowledge. So I try to make these very specific. So one specific topic for our cup of coffee with Kristin's, and I try to keep it about 30 minutes. So today I have a lot that I want to share with you on this episode of Cup of Coffee with Kristin. So we're going to jump right in and get started for this Wednesday together. Today we're going to be focusing on the Jeep generations. It is important to know the different Jeep generations, regardless of what generation Jeep you own, because the more you know, the more educated you are, the more knowledge that you have. Plus, I feel like it's pretty fun to know about the different Jeep Wrangler generations that there have been and kind of a little bit about each one. So, if you are just jumping on here, this is your first time, you're new. Hello, I am Kristin DeLibra from LadyJeepers.com. I help Lady Jeepers, so women who own Jeeps, to safely enjoy their Jeeps on the trail and design their Jeeps so that they can confidently create a life of adventure without fear. We do this using our Confident Trail system, our courses, our lessons, our training videos, our in-person events, and our private consult and build concierge services. We have you covered on every aspect, and we are here for you for that. So, as you're jumping on here with me today, let me know where you are watching from. I see ladies jumping on. Hello, happy Wednesday. So excited to be here, spending a coffee break, really diving into some Jeep education and knowledge together. Because I try to keep these at about 30 minutes, which we're going to go over that today with how much I want to share with you, I'm going to dive in and just get going to go through this amazing education and information with you. If you have any questions come up, please drop them in the comments. One of our amazing helpers will either jump in, answer the questions for you, or I will jump in and answer questions for you as well. But that way we can keep rolling and I can cover as much as I have in here for you today. And we're going to have some fun looking at the different generations of the Jeep. Don't forget, hello, I see ladies jumping on. Let me know where you're watching from. I love to know what part of the country, what state you're in, and where you're joining us from. So let me know. And again, any questions that come up, drop them in the comments. We will be in there to answer those for you as we go through all of this because I have a lot I want to cover. So we're going to jump in and get started. So the generations of the Jeep Wranglers. So a generation refers to the year and the type of Jeep. You're going to hear people talk about generations a lot when we're talking about the Jeep Wranglers. When you're in the Jeep world, in the off-road community, you hear generations talked about a lot. No different than a family generation, different years that you are born, different things like that make up your generation, just like the Jeep. So what I'm going to talk about today is the most common generations of the Wrangler. So we're going to dive right in and get started. So we have to start back at the beginning. So in 1945, Willys Jeep was the first produced for the public back in 1945. Then you saw the CJ or civilian Jeep that was produced from 1954 to 1986. So we're going to talk CJ5 to start with. So the CJ5 was produced from 1954 to 1971. This is actually my husband's CJ5 in the picture. So we have a CJ5 at home that we enjoy and we take out trail riding. So the wheelbase on the CJ5 was 81 inches. Now let's talk about when there were some changes, significant changes. All right, so in 1972, they changed the front axle on the CJ5 to the Dana 30. They stretched the wheelbase to 83 and a half inches to give it just a little more length. And big change in 1972, they moved the gas tank that was originally located underneath the driver's seat. So when you were driving and sitting on the driver's seat, the gas tank was underneath that driver's seat. And so in 1972, they moved that gas tank out from underneath the driver's seat to underneath the rear of the vehicle. That was kind of a big change. So the CJ5 came stock with a Dana 30 front and an AMC 20 rear for 76 to 1986. So again, we're talking about even within a generation, you're going to see different changes were made to different models, even within the same generation. So just because a generation was produced for a length of time, not all of them are going to be the same. I know, lots to learn, right? All right. So then in 1977, the power disc brakes and an air conditioning option came out for the CJ5. So prior to 77, there was no air conditioning. So that was an option that came out in 1977. Then the 1976 to 1986 CJ5s came stock with a 354 or a 409 gear in them. I'm trying to go through. If you own one of these Jeeps, make sure you grab a piece of paper and a pen, start taking some notes as we're going through the generations. So if your Jeep is still stock, this is how it would be, how it would have come from the dealership. So take some notes. And if it's modified, then you know where it started originally. So with its short wheelbase and narrow track, the CJ5 had stability and handling concerns. If you've ever ridden in a CJ5, they definitely feel like the name of our CJ5 is Eileen because it leans a lot as you're driving it. So stability was a big concern throughout that CJ5 production. So now within the CJ generation, you had the CJ6. Excuse me, we are still fighting the crud. It has been a crazy beginning to the year with the winter weather. All right, so this CJ6 was a stretched version of the CJ5. So it had a 20-inch longer wheelbase at 101 total inches, and it was produced from 1995, but as a 1996 model. So basically, it was produced as a 56 model through 1975. They were not super popular in the US. They were sold mostly in other countries, but I wanted to include this because this was an option in the CJ generation. Then you had the CJ7, which was a very popular model within the CJ generation. So the CJ7 was produced from 1976 to 1986. It was a longer version of the CJ5. So it was 10 inches longer at 93.3 inches. And what was different in the CJ7 was the transfer case. It had a standard 2-speed part-time transfer case, and it came with the new optional all-wheel drive quadratech transfer case. Then the gears were dependent on what motor you had in the CJ7. So if you had a diesel, you would have come with the 410 gears. A straight 6 would have been the 373s. And if you had the AMC V8, it was a 355. So knowing what motor came stock in your CJ7 will dictate what stock gear ratio came in that. Then as far as axles, they had the Dana 30 front, the AMC 20 rear, but in 1986, the Dana 44 rear was available in the CJ7. Then the Scrambler or the CJ8, again, another very popular model in the CJ generation. They were produced from 1981 to 1986, and they had a longer wheelbase. So they were a longer wheelbase version of the CJ7. So this is even longer, measuring 103.5 inches, featured a removable half cab. So you'll see Scrambler conversions where they turned them into a pickup truck, and the gears were dependent on the motor that was in it, just like the CJ7. Then you had the CJ10. Again, this wasn't as popular in the US. Most of these were sold to other countries, but you still will see them. They were produced from 1981 to 1985. They were basically a CJ bodied pickup truck. They had rectangular headlights instead of the round headlights. And here's the biggest difference: they had a 10-slot grill instead of the 7-slot grill. They had a Dana 44 front, and in the rear, you either got a Dana 44 rear or a Dana 60 rear. So these CJ10s are amazing if you can find one. Then we're going to move to the next generation, which is the YJ model. This is my YJ in the picture. I love the square headlight life. I know there's controversy because this was the only generation that was made with the square headlights in the Wrangler. I know some people, touchy subject, but I love the square headlight life. A little different. I love my YJ. So basically, the YJ is most recognizable and known for their square headlights. They were launched in 1986, but they were sold as 1987s. So even if your YJ was purchased in 1986, it is a 1987 model. So they were produced from 1987 to 1995. Even though you could purchase them in May of 1986, you were purchasing a 1987 model. The wheelbase on the YJ was 93.4 inches. So they had a little longer wheelbase than the CJ5 counterpart to it. The YJ came with a Dana 30 front and a Dana 35 rear. The most common gear is the 354, but it did come in a 373 or a 410, but the 354 was the most common. Again, knowing what came stock in that Jeep as far as motor, transmission, so many different factors go into what gears are in these older generation Jeeps. So, an interesting fact for you. See, here are the fun facts to know. No 1996 model year Wrangler were made. The YJs that were made in early 1996 were sold as 1995 models because the TJ was coming out. So, just a little fun fact, no 1996 model Wranglers were produced. The YJs that were bought were sold as 1995s, and then the TJ rolled out afterwards. Fun fact to know. So now we're going to talk about the TJ and LJ models within the TJ generation. So we started with the CJ generation. We moved to the YJ generation. And now in 1997, we move into the TJ generation. So the TJ was produced from 1997 to 2006. And it was the first coil spring suspension. So no more leaf springs. It actually went to the coil spring suspension. So the TJ was the first generation to bring forward stock from the factory the coil spring suspension instead of the leaf springs. So CJs and YJs were leaf spring suspension. The wheelbase on the TJ was 93.4 inches, and they went back to the round headlights. And the first Rubicon was introduced in the TJ generation. Lots of changes. TJ generation marks some changes that we still see today. So the TJ came with a Dana 30 front and an option for the Dana 35 or Dana 44 rear. Now, the TJ Rubicon, when it was introduced, came with the Dana 44 front and Dana 44 rear and 410 gears and equipped with selectable lockers. So this is really where the birth of the Rubicon started, was in the TJs with the TJ Rubicon. Then we're going to talk about the LJ. So the LJ is kind of the unicorn of the Jeep Wranglers and the Jeep Wrangler generations because they were only produced from 2004 to 2006. The LJ was the longer version of the TJ in essence. So the longer wheelbase, also known as the Wrangler Unlimited, is known as the LJ. So it is 15 inches longer than the traditional TJ Within the LJs, even though they were only produced from 2004 to 2006, they came with a Dana 30 front and a Dana 44 rear and a standard 373 gear. Now, in 2005, the Rubicon was released in the LJ. So the LJ Rubicon is the absolute unicorn when we are talking about the Jeep Wrangler Generations, because it was not produced for very long. So it came out in 2005 as part of the TJ generation. And when the LJ Rubicon came out, again, it had the Dana 44 front, Dana 44 rear, 410 gears, and the selectable lockers. So you're going to see as we move across the generations, the Rubicon was born in the TJ generation. You saw it in the TJ, the LJ, and then you see it continue with the newer generations as well. So then we move forward to 2007. And this is the JK generation. And the JK generation introduced for the first time ever factory. So straight from the factory as a stock option, the 4-door Wrangler Unlimited. So first time the 4-door was produced by Jeep and offered direct stock from the factory as a 4-door. So that was a big change that came out in 2007. So when that 4-door Jeep was introduced, there's some different feelings on 2-door versus 4-door, but it is still the Jeep Wrangler Unlimited in the 4-door, so it is still a Jeep Wrangler. The wheelbase on the 2-door JK was 95.4 inches, and the wheelbase on the 4-door JKU was 116 inches. So you're seeing a change in the wheelbase. I mean, significant change from the very first CJs to this JKU generation. Then the most common gear ratio was the 321, but there was a 373 or 410, but the package determined the gear ratio in your JKU. They came out, they offered so many different packages, special editions, limited editions in that JKU generation. So knowing what model you had, what upgrade packages you have, those are going to dictate the specs and the specifics on your JK or your JKU, because there were so many different optional packages, special editions, and everything like that. We did a JKU class that was specific to the different models, different packages, and different options available on the JKU in our educational program, because that really is its own class. There's so much in there. So then we moved in 2018, they started producing the JLU, which is the current generation that we are in now. So the current generation Jeep Wrangler being produced is the JLU. They came to market in 2018. So there have been changes and upgrades made since that JLU first came to the market. So knowing what year JLU you have, what packages you have, really dictate what specifications and what stock factory specifications your Jeep has underneath it. But all the JLU models have the front axle disconnect on them. So this is something that they kind of brought back from the YJ. So the YJ had a vacuum front axle disconnect. Now this is an electronic that they brought back in the JLU. What that really means is instead of having a one-piece front axle, you have a two-piece front axle. It does everything on its own. It's not anything we do, but when you put it in two-wheel drive, it electronically disconnects so that you are getting better gas mileage because you don't have the wheels turning with everything moving, the resistance, and the wear and tear put on all of those parts. So when you put it in four-wheel drive, it electronically locks that front axle. So now it becomes a one-piece axle. When you put it in two-wheel drive, it disconnects so it can move independently. This is something all JLU generation Jeeps have in them. It was a new change that was brought forward. Another new change that was brought forward with the JLJLUs was they introduced the stop start feature and added that second auxiliary battery. That is for fuel efficiency, that is for emissions. So they made some changes and brought forward that start stop and the second auxiliary battery. That was something brand new introduced in the JLJLU generations. So the gear ratio options, there are so many as you look through the JLJLU generation. You have the 345, the 373, the 410, 456, and 488. So they introduced the Rubicon Recon package. When they did so, that gave you an upgraded option to upgrade to a 456 or 488 gear ratio on the Rubicon Recon package. So again, knowing what Jeep you have, what model, and what packages you have are going to determine what your specs are for your JLU. So again, it's based on model and packages. We are going to do an updated JLJLU specific class where all we talk about is the JLJLUs, the different packages, what the kind of stock factory options were, and what packages affected what. So that will be coming up on one of our next episodes of Cup of Coffee with Kristin. We will be diving in to really look at the JLJLU a little more in depth because, again, it really is its own 30-minute focus, if not a little bit more, because, again, they made changes in different years with different options that were available, different packages that affected those different options. I mean, and we're even talking like what axles are underneath the Jeep were determined by the packages, especially in the 2018, 2019. Then you saw different changes made with different options, and then especially with the Rubicon Recon packages that came out. So we will go in depth in that together. So if that's something you can't wait for, keep an eye out. Cup of coffee with Kristin. We will dive into that super specific together as well. I know I've been talking fast, but I wanted to make sure we got through all of this amazing information. And I feel like it's so fun to go through and talk about the different generations of the Jeeps together. And I'm trying my best to keep it in our 30-minute or less for our Cup of Coffee with Kristin. All right. And I'm going to touch a little bit on the JT or the Gladiator. So that was Jeep's answer to the pickup truck. It is the newest change from Jeep, and that is the Gladiator or the JT. And again, keep an eye out here for a cup of coffee with Kristin. We are going to do a JT Gladiator specific class as well, because as we start to look at, the different generations, even within those different generations, there are different packages, different options, different years, different things change. So today I wanted to do a nice kind of big overview, touch on the main points and differences as we went through the generations, the CJ, the YJ, the TJ, the LJ, the JK and JKU, the JL, JLU, and then now we have the JT Gladiator. So I wanted to make sure you got a little information on every one of the different generations to understand the Jeep in general, but also to understand the changes that have been made when they were brought forward and what's different in each generation, because every generation of Jeep is a little different. They're their own unique animal. So I also want to talk about the Rubicon model. So this is its own class where we're going to go in depth, and I'm going to be doing a Rubicon specific Control the Beast class on Tuesday, January 23rd. So if you are interested, if you own a Rubicon, if you don't own a Rubicon, you can never know too much about all the different Jeeps. And who knows, you may find yourself in a situation out on a trail or even just hanging out with a new friend that has a Rubicon, and you can bring forward the information that you learn. Again, this is going to be a specific Rubicon class where we are going to talk about what makes the Rubicon different, what the features are, and what that performance means, how trail riding is different with the Rubicon and what you need to know, how to use the features that the Rubicon has, and really just kind of an overview of the Rubicon itself. So again, that is going to be Tuesday, January 23rd. So if you are interested, go ahead and just drop a hashtag Rubicon in the comments. I will jump back in once we get finished up, and I will share the information and a sign up link so you can jump on for that class if you're interested. And again, whether you own a Rubicon or not, this is a great way to get a lot of good, solid education and understanding about one of the specific models of the Jeep Wrangler. So I'm going to celebrate for a minute that we went through an entire Jeep Wrangler generation overview, 30 minutes or less. Woo! I made my time frame. I tried really hard because I look at this coffee break as our quick 30-minute coffee break, our midday coffee break, where you can kind of take your break from work, jump on, get some Jeep education and knowledge, super focused for 30 minutes or less. So thank you for jumping on here with me today for a cup of coffee with Kristin and diving in to talk specifically about the Jeep generation. So don't forget, mark your calendar, put an alert reminder on your phone for every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, right here live together. We jump in for one specific aspect for Jeep education and knowledge, a little caffeine break, and spend some time together. So thank you for jumping on here. Don't worry if you had any questions come up, they will be answered in the comments for you for today. Again, thank you for jumping on, spending this time with me, and keep an eye out every Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern, right here together, live cup of coffee with Kristin. And we are going to continue to dive into even more Jeep education and knowledge. So keep an eye out for the JLJLU specific class that will be coming up, as well as a JT Gladiator specific episode on Cup of Coffee with Kristin that will be coming up as well. So enjoy the rest of your Wednesday and this midweek. I hope you are having a fantastic week. Hope you have an amazing Jeep End coming up. I'm going to try to go live. We have our in-person wrenching, hands-on wrench and ride this coming weekend. So if I have enough service, I'm going to try to go live from our wrenching weekend together as well. So keep an eye out on Lady Jeepers. If I pop on live, make sure to join us because we will be live from our wrench and ride weekend, where we're going to get dirty. We're going to get underneath our Jeeps, and we're going to be working on wrenching, on maintenance, on mechanical. I am so excited. So if you are coming to that, I can't wait to see you. If you couldn't make it to this one or you missed this one, no worries. Keep an eye out. We'll have some more that will be coming up on the schedule as well. So have a fantastic rest of your Wednesday. Thank you again for jumping on here, spending this coffee break with me, talking Jeeps, building your education and knowledge. I will see you next Wednesday, right back here, 3 p.m. Eastern, where we're going to continue to dive in and talk Jeeps. So a fantastic week and weekend. Bye, everybody.